So what is really important about what you're going to talk about is that you are the director of the largest international study on the topic of university business cooperation, and I'm understanding that you're going to share some of those key results with us this morning. So if we could welcome Todd.
Thank you very much, Jaisal, for the introduction. It is a great pleasure for me personally to be up here today. Many of you know my background and my relationship with UIN. To really be up here and be invited to speak at this as a keynote at this conference is a great honour. I think over the years that Arno Meerman and Torsten Cleaver have done a fantastic job in developing this conference series, but they've set us quite a challenge this morning. Firstly, Thursday night they sent us to the Guinness factory and the Guinness storehouse, and then they expect us to arrive the next morning and make some sense of some very complex topics. So there's a challenge for all of you to be listening, and there's a challenge for me to bring it across in a clear and concise way, so let's see how that goes. It's fantastic to see so many familiar faces too. I think that's one of the outstanding things of this conference series, and that's where they've done a really fantastic job, is that there's a really good connection between people, and I think that should be fostered hopefully again today. The other challenge that they've set us, or they've set for you, those that are non-native speakers, they've set you a really remarkable challenge, because firstly they've put the conference in Ireland, so the Irish accent is somewhat difficult to grasp, but then they've thrown in two Aussies on the stage first thing Friday morning. As you're coming out of your haze or starting to wake up, trying to listen to the Australian accent is not so easy. So between Jaisal and I, we're going to box your ears around just during the morning session. So we'll see how it goes. I've got the great pleasure of talking today about how university business can actually drive societies. I think the size of the conference and the increasing size of the conference reflects positively on this topic and why it's actually growing, because it is a growing topic. Probably what's relevant, just quickly, I don't want to talk too much about myself, but what I think is most relevant about my background that I wanted to introduce, and why it's maybe relevant that I'm up here talking about this topic, is that I think I've got, and I was corrected at the last conference I went to, I was told I have a 270-degree understanding of university industry collaboration, because I've never actually worked in government, so maybe that's the missing element. But if you look at my different experiences, I've been, and I'm still am an educator, I have been and still are a researcher. When it comes to startup experience, I've been involved in a number of different startups, including one of the fastest growing tech startups in Asia Pacific during 2003 to 2006. I've got a number of different expert positions, including having the great pleasure of working with the Commission on the HE Innovate Tour, amongst other different expert positions. And then finally, I also engage and dabble a little bit in developing different products and services. I'm a bit of a product nut. I love to create new products. So some of the things that we've actually created, one of the things is really interesting. It's called Tip Your Tongue. It's a board game, and effectively you finish the famous line. So if, for example, we talk about New York, New York by Frank Sinatra, the first line is, start spreading the news. Da, 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 da. I can't sing, and that's very obvious to everybody. The next line, anyone know? Wow, we've got a junkie down the front. I'm leaving today, so that's the next line. So that's the board game. But what's relevant specifically to what we're going to be talking about today is the study that we've executed for the European Commission, firstly done in 2010, 2011. And at the time, it was the largest international study on the topic of university business collaboration. We are in the process of finishing that, the second iteration of this project, 2016, 2017. And the results that we've got until now have already shown that it is, again, the largest international study in this topic. We have a number of different inputs into this project. We've got 50 good practice case studies, so that means we have to go out and actually look at different good practices around Europe as well as internationally. and it also included a major quantitative study of, in the end we ended up with about 17,000 responses. Another thing that I'm particularly proud of, and does anyone know this place, Uvascular? Put your hand up if you've ever been to Uvascular. Wow, that's a significant proportion of the audience here, and there's a few down the front that actually live there. But I would like to announce today that I'm one of only 2 people who have been to Uvascular 3 times, but don't actually come from central Finland. So that's a fact that you didn't know about me. It's something I'm particularly proud of. If you ever get the chance to go there, it is really a beautiful place. But I think it's really relevant to start the conversation today about university business, who cares? I mean, we're all, obviously, if you're at this conference, you've already bought into the concept of university-industry collaboration. Sometimes, and it is our experience, that this step often gets overlooked. Who cares? And I think it's really important that we now revisit who cares and why university industry is actually important. I'm not going to go back into the history of mankind, but just to give you a very brief process of moving from a farming society to the industrial age. And it said we're now moving into, or we are in the knowledge society. But what does that actually mean, the knowledge society? And I think that's really important that we explore that a little bit. Effectively, the knowledge society, it involves innovative business. It involves 3rd-generation universities. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then it also involves some government support. But as I said, let's explore that a little. What is this knowledge society? University-industry collaboration is crucial for developing this knowledge society. And I'm going to show you just quickly how that actually occurs. Firstly, if we talk about innovative business, and even with an SME focus, some of the aspects of innovative business include R&D, ICT, technology, and having skilled people. When you look at it like that, it becomes quite obvious how a university can actually play a role in developing those attributes within these innovative businesses. 3rd-generation university, offering teaching, research, and engagement. Now, some people understand engagement as a 3rd thing, a 3rd mission. Others understand it as research engagement or education engagement, but however you want to see it, as a separate thing or not. So therefore, what we see is to develop innovative businesses, we need to have this 3rd-generation university, and these are the different elements that play a role in that process. So let's do a little bit of exploration with the business. We all know the term incremental innovation. Yes? Yes, everyone's nodding. Yep. Okay, we all know the term radical innovation. Well, your average SME, depending on the country, some will say it's more this direction, some will say it's more this direction. But effectively, the average SME sits somewhere here in terms of their innovation degree. If we put a bit of a frame around that, and you see on the axis on the left-hand side, you've got technology, so existing and new, and on the bottom axis, market, existing and new. So if we have an SME and we want to make it more innovative, what they might need to move into this direction is research, including IP technology. If they wanted to move more in this direction, it's probably more to do with people development, so this some sort of tacit knowledge exchange. And if they wanted to move more in this direction, it might be to do with more entrepreneurial activity. So how can our universities play a role in this process? Well, effectively, greater university collaboration would be necessary for these things. So when we look at those things, it becomes, those different aspects, it becomes really obvious how a university can play a role in creating these innovative businesses. So we talked about innovative businesses, but the next thing that we're going to quickly touch upon is the university. How do we generate, and what the hell is a 3rd-generation university? Well, if we look at it a little bit like this, you have the existing degree of knowledge and the newness of the knowledge, and then on the bottom axis we have the practical application of that knowledge. Now, anyone that's read Henry Etzkowitz would probably follow this discussion about the 1st-generation university, and effectively it was there to educate. Yeah, it wasn't necessarily completely practical, but it was there effectively to regurgitate knowledge. 2nd-generation university, that's where we started in the 1800s. We started to add in the 2nd mission of research, where universities were actually playing a role in developing, much greater role in developing new knowledge. And it's said that we're moving towards this so-called third generation university. And now the third generation university, as you can see there, is that it extends beyond the concept of a second generation university. It moves in a specific direction. It moves much more in a practical direction, as in applying that knowledge that we're actually generating. But not only does it do that, but for the keen observers, you might have noticed that the third generation university actually has a higher degree of new knowledge. Now we're going to explore how that might come to pass today. But effectively what the contention is that as we speed up this cycle of creating new knowledge but then applying it, and creating new knowledge and then applying it, and getting these interactions that Jason was talking about this morning, that we're going to see increasing knowledge development rather than decreasing. So if you've got your average university here, if they want to move in this direction, increase the amount of new knowledge that they're creating, they need to increase researcher capacity. If they want to move in this direction, it's entrepreneurial capacity. If they want to move in this direction, it's increasing relations with business. Again, we see this overlap of how university business collaboration can actually play a role. And that one in the middle, the increasing entrepreneurial capacity, that is something that universities are now accepting as their role. So we're seeing that that all come to pass. So this third generation university, that's where we're moving. Now, we're going to get to know these characters today, so please be observant to the fact that maybe, okay, it is a researcher, but it also is an academic, so it could also include teaching. And the person on the right is the business person. And we're going to work with those two today because we're going to talk about business collaboration, and we're going to talk about the fact that business relationships don't naturally work. That's something that we all are sitting there going, yeah, they don't really work naturally, do they? I want to emphasise the word naturally. They don't naturally work. Why don't they naturally work? Let's have a quick look at that. Well, firstly, on the academic side, we have this lack of risk, the long-term orientation. We have a routine. Knowledge and accuracy is really important, and then there's a set of rules to follow. That's within the university. Then we have the business side. They have almost the opposite profile. Medium-high risk, short-term orientation, dynamism, intuition plays a much greater role in their activities, and then they bend, or in some cases, make or break the rules. So, how do we actually bring these two together? Because generally speaking, if you look at the two characters, that's how sometimes they perceive each other. We have the zombie on the right-hand side trying to extract the last energy from a dying body, and then on the left-hand side we have the crazy scientist off in their ivory tower. So we have to look at these things that these differences that we're seeing. So the change in risk profile, time, speed, mindset, skills, the environment, the paradigm. So if they don't naturally work, but they are essential for developing this knowledge society, question is, what can we do? And that's what we're going to be exploring right now. What can we do to get more of this, or get to this? Now, you're all you've probably all heard the term the ivory tower and how academics are in their own ivory tower, but I find that this description lacks a little bit of context. What is the ivory tower and how does it relate to what we're talking about? Well, effectively, when we're talking about the ivory tower, we're talking mainly about research and education. Now, let's give it the frame that we talked about before. The ivory tower and the pure university is about increasing the new knowledge. It's going up in this direction. That's why it looks a bit like an ivory tower. It's not necessarily moving over into practical application of knowledge. It's pursuing new knowledge. So that's where we have the ivory tower, but we need to build around the ivory tower if we're going to get to this knowledge society. So how do we do that? Effectively, the next step we might look at is in respect to how they can collaborate. So universities and industries can collaborate. And what you see here is a set of different activities which relate to education, so how they can collaborate in respect to education. The next level that we have there is in respect to commercialisation. You see a number of different ways in which university and industry can share the same space or collaborate in that field. We have an area called management collaboration, so that might be in terms of governance, regional governments, or it might be on the board of either a university or on the board of a business, so exchanging positions. And then we have this thing called shared facilities. Shared resources, if you like, another way of saying it. Then we add in the different types of research collaboration. So effectively what you see there is the environment of the third generation university. The not only pursuing pure knowledge and new knowledge, but in fact finding ways to get it actively into society. And it's not just about research, it's not just about education, and it's not just about commercialisation. And that's what we see very clearly right here. And why is this relevant? And if you reflect, and this is something that we see in our not only results but also experience, is that when it comes to an academic who collaborates, they generally don't just collaborate in one way. It's not just about research collaboration. They might collaborate in research, but they might also do some commercialisation. They might also engage the business in helping them to develop their curriculum. They might get them to do guest lectures. They might send the students as part of a student mobility program, internship, for example. So for an academic, just talking about one of these areas alone is not necessarily relevant because they're dealing with multiple ways. Same with the business. On the business side, businesses are actually collaborating with universities in multiple ways. What we tend to do in a university, however, is we tend to isolate and put them in silos. So here's, if you want research collaboration, it's here. If you want education collaboration, it's here. If you want, management collaboration, governance, you might have to go and speak to, or maybe there's no one to go and speak to. So we make it really complicated between these two actors, business and academics. They collaborate if they do, and they do it across a number of different ways, or they do it in a number of different ways, and same with the business. So it's really important that we recognise this. We often get asked, yeah, but where would you focus your efforts if you're trying to develop collaboration? What are the most important collaboration forms? I don't want to say what are the most important, but what I will say is in our experience, there are certain forms of collaboration which we call accelerators, or there's something that expands the amount of collaboration exponentially, or more, to a greater degree. So in other words, a facilitator, an accelerator, something like that. And what we see is that these forms of collaboration, specifically the ones in orange, so that's shared resources or shared facilities, professional mobility, governance, student mobility and dual study programs, they tend to create the sort of situations where more collaboration expands out of it. The funny thing is that we, as universities, for example, and also on the business side, we rarely focus on these forms of collaboration. And in fact, our survey results across Europe show that these are the least developed forms of collaboration. However, we see that they have this exponential expansion of collaboration. We'll relate this back to some results that we'll see in a while, but it relates to the building of relationships. So we'll come to that. So what's the first thing we can do? We can recognise the types of university business collaboration, all of the types and all the ways in which the two actors collaborate. The first thing we're going to talk about, though, is the barriers, because they're the things that we first come up against. Everyone's nodding and going, yeah, there's those. There's a lot of discussion about barriers. So we're going to see the results for Europe. These results were from the study that we executed at the end of last year. And what we see is for the different actors, the first one is university management. The second one is the academic, and then we have the business person. But for university management, you can see very clearly the slant or the message that is being communicated. It is, generally speaking, an issue of resources to do with SMEs perhaps, or to do with the government. Basically, if you look at that list, the university manager is saying it's a funding problem, but it's not our problem, it's somebody else's problem. It's either the business or it's the government need to fund it. So it's a funding problem. If you look at the academic, it's a little bit more nuanced. I think this is quite accurate in terms of my experience of being an academic trying to collaborate. One of the biggest barriers they're saying is obviously the resources of SMEs, but then they're talking about bureaucracy. And they're also talking about having insufficient work time to collaborate. Interestingly enough, the university management don't recognise the barrier that is presented by bureaucracy, but the academics do, because they're dealing with it. The last area, how does this differ for business people? Well, effectively they're saying it's more to do with these differences of understanding. Lack of people with business knowledge within the university, differing motivations, differing time horizons, for example. So what does that summarise to? It basically means that university managers are saying it's a funding problem and it's everybody else's problem, not our problem. Someone else has to fund it. Academics are saying resources, time and bureaucracy are the major issues. And the businesses are saying that the cultural differences are the major barrier. Now, I want to emphasise that for each of your specific countries and regions, we have seen that barriers can be quite different. So this is the European results, aggregated. But if we applied this survey to your specific region, or could be region or could be nation, depending on the policies that are in place, you could find some different barriers. I mean, that's been our experience through the studies. So, firstly, the next thing is address these barriers. If we can actually remove these barriers some way, then we might have a chance of, well, it increases the likelihood that university business collaboration is actually going to occur. Now, I'm going to do a quick exercise. Tony, do you mind just getting up for a sec?
Sure.
He's from Yale Vascular, by the way, so if you want to know anything about Yale Vascular. Okay, so look at that bag. You're going to stand over there?
Yeah.
Okay, so please stand over there.
Here.
Bit further? Bit further. Okay. I don't know, who do you want to be? Do you want to be the academic or the business person?
Academic.
You want to be the academic? Okay, fantastic. We're going to switch sides. So you're going to be the academic, I'm the business person. At the moment, it's very clear. Now, for the people at the back, it's a bit hard to see, but I don't have something bigger. We have a barrier between us, okay? What happens when I take away this barrier? So we want to collaborate, we'd be interested, yeah, why not? Sounds good. If we take away this barrier, what actually happens? Yeah, everyone's thinking, oh, it's too early on a Friday morning to be thinking about this. So the brain's starting to turn over. Our experience is not necessarily anything. Sometimes the removal of the barrier creates collaboration, but more often than not, it doesn't necessarily change. Okay, we actually tested this. So when an academic perceives there to be high barriers, then yeah, more than likely they're not going to do it. But just because if an academic perceives there to be lower barriers, it doesn't necessarily mean they go and actually collaborate. So removing this barrier doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually going to come, Tony and I are going to come together. Yeah. Thanks, Tony. Thanks. Is that your bag?
No.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for the prop. You'll find that everything's still in there. I didn't take anything. So the question is, okay, remove the barriers. Then what else can we do? If we remove this barrier, it means that there's a possibility or an increased likelihood that we can collaborate, but in fact doesn't necessarily create collaboration. So that's where we move on to this thing, which is effectively we need the thing behind us to push us to want to do it. So in this scenario, instead of just removing the barrier, and we might just continue to stand there, we need something behind us to actually move us close together, to drive us close together, if you like. So we're going to talk about that in two parts. The first part is to do with motivations. We call them motivators. Same study, European results. We see that the university managers are saying that the major motivation for them to undertake university-industry collaboration is funding and financial resources. But this is where their opinion starts to get a little bit more nuanced, if you like. They also see the motivation as being improving graduate employability. But then, finally, they're expressing the desire to get universities' knowledge out into society. So they're seeing something a bit altruistic. Academics, I thought this was extremely interesting to actually have the academic having the maturity to say that we get new insights for our research. In fact, that's an important way in which we might get new insights for our research. So that's already something that aligns with the interests of the academics. So that's one of the motivators. Second motivator is to use my research in practice, so actually to see it in a practical reality. And then finally, to address society's issues. So again, we see this desire to want to make a difference. Finally, business people, are they interested so much in society? Well, we've seen in some results, yes. In this case, what they are interested in is effectively an innovation capacity. So whether it's to do with access to new technologies, or it could be to do with their personnel capacity, or increase to new future research, for example. So, graduates funding research into society, research insights, research into society for the academic, and for the business person, new discoveries and innovation. What you see there, and you all probably know about this, is the difference in motivation for the different actors. What I want to emphasise through this has come through all of our results, but also our experience, is that we need to actually embrace these differences. Not say, okay, we all should be, everyone wants to do their own thing. That's a problem. In fact, rather than seeing that as a problem, it needs to be embraced and recognised that they actually have different motivations. It relates to the fact that they're actually there to do different things. A university is not there as an arm of business just to execute applied research. An academic is also not there for the same purpose. So we have to recognise and embrace these differences of motivation. I'll explain a little bit how that might work. We asked, and this is one of the issues that what we're talking about, and the fact that these motivations are not being embraced. We asked the question to the academic, who gets the benefits of collaboration? Who do we think? I'm going to give you a few actors. Students, university generally, business, and the academic. Who thinks the most benefits go to students? What about the university itself? I'm going to need more participation. What about for the business? Okay, we see a lot more hands up there. What about for the academic? A few. We see a few more. Okay. Effectively, academics have told us this same result in multiple different studies. That is effectively that the first beneficiary of collaboration is students. Then they say the business. Then they say university. And then finally they say the academic gets the least amount of benefits. These are academics who collaborate. So even the ones that are collaborating say we get the least benefits out of it. We have a problem. What do you think the business people say? Students? University? Business? Academics? Students? University? Business? Academics. So what we see is that the actors actually engaging in collaboration, they're saying, well, I'm not the one that gets the most benefits from the activity. In this context, it's amazing that they actually collaborate, but they do. So what does this mean? Let's try and explore this a bit. And how does this come to pass? I'll give you just a basic scenario when it comes to joint R&D and how it works. Executing joint research and development together, the business and the academic. And then we have these things which are business-focused results, so either the project is focused much more on applied research, or we have the situation where it's much more academic, it's much more blue sky, so the business misses out on the results or misses out on the benefits. So you have these problems, as you can see there. That's the average R&D project. I want to suggest some other scenario, because we have a gap here. When you think about, anyone that knows the logic model knows the moving from activities to an output to outcome impacts is really important. But what we see is that these are blank. These areas are actually blank for both the business and for the academic. So we have a gap. This knowledge transfer, call it whatever you like, but valley of death, I've labelled it there. So we have this gap between the project or the execution of the collaboration and the conversion into outcomes and impacts. So what could be done about it? Well, firstly, we could align the interests right at the start to actually recognise the motivators that we've just talked about. to actually say, okay, so the academic wants to get a publication out of it. Let's see what we can do about that. The business actually want to get something concrete out of it. They want it applied into their institution. So how can we actually organise that? So that's the first thing we can do. The next thing we can also do is we can support the conversion of these outputs into outcomes, which are the benefits that each of the party get, and then into impacts for more generally for society. So we need to follow these through and actually support the conversion into impact. And it might look like something like that. I wanted to give you a quick example. There's many very good examples that we've seen over the 50 good practice cases. I wanted to just give you this one because it aligns with this point. I'm not saying it's necessarily the best example, but it is one that aligns with this point. It's a project that is being undertaken primarily with the University of South Australia. It's called the Amira 260 project. And it effectively brings together a consortium of large mining and minerals companies, their SME suppliers, as well as research institutions. As you can see some of the logos there. It's been running for over 29 years. And it goes through project iterations of about 3 years, with each iteration has its own research focus, so a specific focus in the research. The way they do it, I wanted to quickly explain to you, which I thought was a really positive way of recognising the different motivations. They have a blue sky research topic, what do you call it, stream. It's a blue sky research stream. Then they have an applied research stream. But then they go one step further. They have site visits where they actually go to the mine site and they apply the research at the mine site to solve the problem. And what you can see there is there's a short-term, it recognises this short-term orientation as well as the long-term orientation. Now let's flip over the results. If you look at the results, 300 refereed research publications, 50 PhD students, but this is really interesting, is that 41 of those work in the mining and processing sector. So it's directly bringing researchers into that industry. And then the total benefits have been estimated at over 1 billion. So I think this gives us a really good, we say, oh yeah, they're differing motivations, what are we going to do about it? I think this is a really neat approach to recognising these different motivations. And as Guinness said last night, things come to those who wait. Inspired by Guinness. Yeah, I think we're all a bit inspired by Guinness this morning. So if I lose my voice, that's inspired by Guinness as well, I think. So the next area that we're going to go to is to do with facilitators. Now, these are the thing that actually, part of the drivers that actually help to facilitate the collaboration and make it actually work. What we see is, again, for the university managers, starting with them, really interesting. Existence of mutual trust, shared goal, and then they recognise funding again, but that is one of the facilitators that helps to create collaboration. What do you think academics say? Funding, research, I don't know, actors in the middle. Trust. They effectively say exactly the same thing. Existence of mutual trust, existence of a shared goal. Okay, business. What is going to be a facilitator for business? Is it the fact that they can access some funding and that's going to facilitate the process, or is it some sort of profit-orientated result?
Exactly the same.
Exactly the same? Exactly the same. Until now, we've seen their differences, but this result really shows their similarities. They're all saying the same thing. They're saying we want trusted relationships. That is what facilitates our collaboration. That is what helps us to collaborate in such a way that we can get the outcomes that we're actually looking for. So that gives us a massive clue as to what we can do with it. I'll let you read this just quickly. I think that gives us a further insight. So, addressing barriers, recognising these motivations as well as creating facilitators. We need to quickly recognise the factors affecting the collaboration. They might not be something we can necessarily do something about, but it's important to recognise. What do you think the effect of the amount of time that an academic has been in academia, what do you think that has, what sort of influence does that have on their collaboration? Does it mean that over time they'll increase? The more time that they spend in the university, more likely to increase their collaboration in the future? Or do you think it decreases it? Decreases. Decreasing. So this is, again, from our European study. And what we see very clearly is, I don't know if you want to call it the institutionalisation of the academic, but what you can see very clearly, though, is that the collaboration over a period of time, the more years that the academic spends in the institution, the less likely they are to collaborate.
Isn't that history counting?
Like history.
The old people who didn't.
It could also relate to that. Yes, that's a good point. I don't want to make you too depressed at this point, especially if you're existing in academia where there's a certain pathway, because I think there's something that could also help us to address this specific issue, and that is this result. This is if an academic has actually spent time in industry. And the more time that they've spent in industry, the more collaboration they undertake as an academic. Again, probably for most of you, not necessarily a surprise. What I wanted to emphasise, though, is that our results show that there's a significant difference even after 6 months of working in industry. So it doesn't mean that an academic has to work in industry for 10 years. It might be just simply 6 months. That might be enough to increase their collaboration. Just having that understanding of how industry works. Is this different for industry? Our experience is not. A study that was undertaken by the Science to Business Marketing Research Centre, of which I'm a party to, it was in 2005, and it looked at the customer satisfaction from business in their collaboration with academia, and they saw basically two different cohorts, two different groups. Those that had an R&D department were much more likely or significantly more likely to be satisfied with the relationship, those that didn't have an R&D department. So effectively what we're seeing is understanding each other's environment can be really important for university industry collaboration. So recognise these cultural effects. The final area that I wanted to touch on was in respect to mechanisms to support university industry collaboration. Now there are a number of different mechanisms that we can apply. We have policies, strategies, structures, and activities, and we've explored this in our study, but I'm not going to present all of those results today. I want to focus on one specific area, and that is to do with strategies. What you see here is the extent of development. So how well developed are these different strategies in a European context? So paper strategies, meaning a vision and mission statement of a university that says embraces university industry collaboration. Dedication of resources to developing collaboration, business experience in the HEI, and then academic incentives. So incentivising the academic to collaborate. Let's look at the next area, impact. Which of these do you think has the most impact? Well, perhaps not coincidentally. It looks a little bit like this. Gold medal goes to academic incentives, second place to dedication of resources, and then business experience. So what we see is that we have this inverse relationship between what we've developed as strategies and what actually has the most impact. Now, I'm not saying that just having a mission and vision that recognises industry collaboration is not a bad thing. I'm saying that can be a very, very good starting point. But that alone doesn't necessarily create university industry collaboration. You need these other elements. Okay, good. So that brings us to the final point, which is to provide supporting mechanisms. What actually happens if we get all this right? I'll just go through these very quickly. Academic might be a source of funding, informs their teaching, scientific productivity, equipment and resources. We are seeing increasing evidence that academics are actually getting higher quality publications, but also higher quantity through university industry collaboration. If anyone's interested, I can send you some of that evidence. For the business, we see access to new discoveries, talented students, and also part of their innovation chain, if you like. increasing evidence that businesses are actually recognising the potential of accessing talented students. Had a conversation with it was a really interesting conversation with one of the, I think they were the highest funders of research in Denmark last night. One of the business representatives was here. And one of the points that he made very strongly to me was that we see this as a way of recruiting. And that's what we're increasingly seeing. It's not just about research, it's also about recruitment. For the university, they get a number of benefits: relevance of research, transfer of knowledge, and also third-party money. And then for the students, they get more relevant study, they get job competencies, future job prospects, access to the job market. So that's all the different benefits that they get if we do this right, and society benefits by job creation, economic growth, all the things that we know about collaboration. So let's wrap this up. If university business relationships don't naturally work, what can we do about it to ensure we get to this? Recognise the different types of collaboration, address these barriers, facilitate the drivers, recognise the cultural effects, and provide these supporting mechanisms. And what happens if we get this right, then everyone benefits. What I want to do is I want to leave you with a little bit of inspiration. Some of you already know this video, but I think this is really relevant because I've been talking, this is one of the themes that I've noticed in talking to people at this conference, is actually that many of you feel like you are quite alone or siloed in your institution, or maybe you're coming up against a lot of resistance. And at this point, I wanted to give you a final thought.
If you've learned a lot about leadership and making a movement, then let's watch a movement happen start to finish in under 3 minutes and dissect some lessons. First, of course, a leader needs the guts to stand alone and look ridiculous. But what he's doing is so simple, it's almost instructional. This is key. You must be easy to follow. Now here comes the first follower with a crucial role. He publicly shows everyone else how to follow. Notice how the leader embraces him as an equal. So it's not about the leader anymore, it's about them, plural. Notice how he's calling to his friends to join in. So it takes guts to be a first follower. You stand out and you brave ridicule yourself. Being a first follower is an underappreciated form of leadership. The first follower transforms a lone nut into a leader. If the leader is the flint, the first follower is the spark that really makes the fire. Now here's the second follower. This is a turning point. It's proof the first has done well. Now it's not a lone nut, and it's not two nuts. 3 is a crowd, and a crowd is news. A movement must be public. Make sure outsiders see more than just the leader. Everyone needs to see the followers, because new followers emulate followers, not the leader. Now here come 2 more people, then 3 more immediately. Now we've got momentum. This is the tipping point, and now we have a movement. As more people jump in, it's no longer risky. If they were on the fence before, there's no reason not to join in now. They won't stand out, they won't be ridiculed, and they will be part of the in crowd if they hurry. And over the next minute you'll see the rest who prefer to stay part of the crowd, because eventually they'd be ridiculed for not joining. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a movement is made. So let's recap what we've learned. If you are a version of the shirtless dancing guy, all alone, remember the importance of nurturing your first few followers as equals, making everything clearly about the movement, not you. Be public, be easy to follow. But the biggest lesson here, did you catch it? Leadership is overglorified. Yes, it started with the shirtless guy, and he'll get all the credit, but you saw what really happened. It was the first follower that transformed a lone nut into a leader. There's no movement without the first follower. See, we're told that we all need to be leaders, but that would be really ineffective. The best way to make a movement, if you really care, is to courageously follow and show others how to follow. When you find a lone nut doing something great, have the guts to be the first person to stand up and join in.
It doesn't matter if you are the lone nut or you confined within your institution the lone nuts that are collaborating externally, then that is the main message of this video for me. So I wanted to leave you with that, Finally, what I just wanted to, there's a couple of recommendations that I have for different stakeholders. What can you actually do? Start making funding available, perhaps also for education within a university. Build understanding of business within the institution. Reduce teaching time and bureaucracy for academics. And each stakeholder has the same activity. Focus activities on building relationships. What can the government do? Create long-term funding mechanisms that recognise the development of relationships, so it could be up to 5, 10-year funding timeframes. Create societal challenges that bring these different actors together and encourage professional mobility. And then for the business, what can they actually do? Well, take a long-term approach to your collaboration externally. Align your innovation objectives with the academic and seek to build these trusted relationships. The last thing I just wanted to make you aware of is the study that we're doing for the European Commission. We've expanded into a new monitor. So you probably are all aware of the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. Well, we're creating something similar for the environment of university engagement. It's called the Global University Engagement Monitor. If you're interested in this concept, please talk to myself, Arno Meerman, or Victoria Galamuros today in the coming period this afternoon. We have countries already committed in these locations, country partners, but if you're not from one of these countries and you're interested in actually undertaking the survey within your country, then please approach us. There's different resources you can get access to at this one particular website, ub-cooperation.eu, including the case studies, good practice case studies. Sign up to get some regular updates of the results, because we're in the process of actually analysing at the moment. So there's going to be a lot of results coming out. So that's it. Appreciate the time and the enthusiasm, and we started to get a little bit of interaction during the speech. So thanks for listening effectively. Yeah.
Please.